I've come to talk today about the negative effects of the widespread proliferation of suburban developments in the United States. And I believe it has a negative effect on our environment and our society in a way that other forms of development, more dense developments, do not. The primary concern is the effect that it has on the environment as opposed to other forms, which I'll add don't have no effect, but they have much less of an effect than suburban developments. They have a much more pronounced effect on climate change because they produce a much higher dependency on automobiles, which produce a large amount of greenhouse gases, and unlike other forms of urban development, they do not provide many alternate means of transportation, such as bicycling and walking. Other forms do, because suburbs encompass a much wider area, and thus it forbids alternate forms that don't involve automobile transport. They also destroy wildlife habitats at a much increased rate due to taking up a much larger surface area. It produces urban sprawl at a much higher rate, and thus encroaches on wildlife habitats much quicker than other forms would have. Another reason that this surface area causes is the large amount of urban runoff that it creates. With the much wider surface area of roads and the amount of vehicles that are now present on these roads, when the rain and the snow melts come, it washes away copper, zinc, lead, and any gasoline in the road, which are lifted out of the ground because of the rain and washed off into oceans, into lakes and aquifers. And this also applies to the roofs and parking lots, which suburbs provided much more in terms of surface area than other developments. They also negatively affect the human's personal health. According to the Center of Disease Control, motor vehicles account for 30% of air pollutants, such as oxides of nitrogen and hydrocarbons. Yet this proportion becomes much higher in sprawled suburban areas. And the previously mentioned urban runoff can also affect our water table. According to the American Journal of Public Health, approximately 42 million people in rural and suburban areas use their own private water supplies, which are not scrutinized by the FDA or the CDC, and they can easily become affected by urban pollutants carried by runoff. And it also is a large promoter of obesity. It is known that a suburban lifestyle promotes a more sedentary lifestyle, and it also harms the safety of society. The previously mentioned surface area creates a water barrier a lot of times. Basically, it keeps water from sinking into the ground, which produces floods during rainfalls and large amounts of rainfalls and snowmelts. And due to the automobile dependency, produces a much higher rate of vehicular crashes, which are a leading cause of death among people aged 1 through 24. And that's all I have.
Oh,
You need the rough draft too, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
thank you. All right, Jacob, I know what your topic is, but I don't know what your claim is because you don't say it as a proposition. You treat it as a presupposition. I'm here to tell you how this is harmful, not I'm here to argue that it is harmful or say it is harmful. It sounds like it's an informative speech as opposed to a declarative point of view. Your secondary points, I thought they were being labeled, but it turns out that you don't really preview the secondary points. You just start the arguments and you start listing all of the potential issues. And I think because you've got a long list, you feel like you need to go ahead and dive into them. I think they need to be organized and structured a little bit more so that they fit together. You've got climate, wildlife, runoff, obesity, safety, floods. It's like everything in the kitchen sink is being tossed in here. You should group some of those things together. Do the environmental harms in one area, do the human health harms in a different area, and maybe whatever your other issue happens to be in a third area, or just leave it in the two areas. That would be fine. I heard a lot of claims. I only heard a couple of pieces of data to support any of those claims. One is about the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere as a result of use of automobiles, but I didn't see much information that suggested that that was attributable to the suburbs or urban sprawl. Mostly it's because we have cars, and you seem to operate on the assumption that if we didn't have urban sprawl, we wouldn't have cars. I think that that's a huge inference that you need some more data on. And then the other one was the piece of data that you had about the number of places that have their own water. People are supplying their own water off of whatever aquafilter they have or aquifer they're using, or their wells, or whatever that happens to be. And the argument is that it's not regulated, and so they're subject to potential runoff. But you don't have any examples of anybody getting sick. It's very speculative at this particular point, and I assume that if people are operating on their own wells, that's a fairly rural area. So what's the likelihood of runoff from massive amounts of traffic, for instance, that might have left crap on the road like you were talking about? I just don't know that. It's a nice piece of factual data, but the inference that you're making from it is pretty broad. The climate change thing and wildlife habitats are asserted. The runoff issue, that's the only thing that you have some information on. The obesity issue is asserted. The safety issue is asserted. The only thing that you have right at the very end when you're talking about automobiles is that that's the largest cause of death for people of a particular age group. And there might be a reason that people in that age group die more frequently in automobiles than the fact that cars exist in suburban environments. That seems like a huge inference that you're making also. So I think you need a lot more structure for the argument, and you definitely need more evidence to support those particular points. All right, thank you.